In this tutorial, I just want to talk about the Preferences window. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Sidewinder, just selecting a new file here. But under File, Preferences is what we're going to look at. Essentially, we've just got a number of just the default preferences. Most of these are only valid when you create a new file. This is essentially your starting point. Default system units, whether you typically work in metric or imperial units, you can set that there. Country location, essentially this is just a number of different worldwide regions, only because different regions of the world have different standard default values. So what this does is, I'm going to just exit out of here, is whatever that's set at, when I go under Info, under Other here, we can see the location. This is the exact same thing. So when you create a new file, whatever your default will appear here. You can always change this on any individual file, but how this comes into play again is simply if I say North America, for example, I go over to Material, and again, Sidewinder will automatically select things for us, and it'll base it on that type region of the world. For example, the belt width. If I click on that, I right click, I can see that the standard belt widths are 500, 650, 800, 1000, so on and so forth. 1200, 1400. Those are standard belt widths in the States and in Europe and whatnot. However, if I happen to be working in a project in Africa, or you're a designer in Africa, you know your standard belt widths are 750, 900, 1050, so on and so forth. So that's how they come into play, and that's true for belts, for roll diameters. There's a number of different standards in Sidewinders that are based on the region of the world that you're working in. So that's it. The language is pretty slick. You can go down and select some of the built-in languages. This is also a feature that if your language isn't here, we're happy to implement it for you. We've got a language, essentially spreadsheet, we can send you. We can do a computer translation, and then if you can go through and just kind of, a lot of times you have to manually still go through all the items, but we can add additional languages. But this is what we have in here thus far. For example, if I pick Spanish, it's going to go ahead and say, yep, we're going to make Spanish the default, but you can always press F8 at any time to switch back and forth. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and you can see if I push F8, we're in English, push F8 again, we're back to Spanish, English, Spanish, so on and so forth. So that's pretty slick, and that's throughout everything. It's all the input. If I run this file, we can see that the input, the output changes, the reports, you name it, everything changes. So that's pretty slick. I go back to Preferences. I'm going to switch back to English and just save this so we can work back in English. Imperial Units, if you are working in Imperial Units, you have your choice of looking at belt tensions either as in pounds or in PIW, whichever you prefer. Default idler methodology, again, Imperial people will probably tend to have SEMA as their default. Everybody else is normally universal. The belt speed input method, this correlates again with the info other page right here, what the default value is here. I'm not going to get into the details on that. There's a whole nother, if you look at the belt speed tutorial, it talks all about this input value. Continuing on, just the default file directory, wherever you want your new files to be defaulted to. Create a backup, simply creates a backup when you open a Sidewinder file. Add a revision file name, well, obviously do that. It'll add the default revision file name. Whether you want these tooltips to show or not. A lot of times after you're kind of more comfortable with the software, as you see there, it just popped up, you might turn that checkbox off if you don't want to look at the tooltips. And if you want to autosave the file. Also, there's some options when you hit the solve button or the run button. Sidewinder can automatically just save the file. It can prompt you to save the file. The default is it doesn't save the file. It only saves when you actually say save, but you can change that if you want. The report preferences here. Use Word as a default, otherwise it'll use the internal Sidewinder word editor. But the custom logo, this is something that's really simple to do, and it's kind of nice. I'm just going to go ahead and show you. By default, the Sidewinder Plus is the default logo. If we go ahead and just run this, and I'll create a report, we can see we get the Sidewinder logo right there. However, it's really simple. If you have a logo from your company website, or if you want to create one, whatever, you can go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna draw some lines on here just to show you how simple this is. I'm gonna do that. Maybe I'll fill in a couple pink or something. Anyway, let's say that's my logo. Now, obviously, we don't want to save a logo that's 800 by 600 pixels and 20 gig in size. You want to make your logo fairly small because it's going to be on all your reports, and there's no sense making the file bigger than you need to. But I'm going to go ahead and just save this as a PNG file. I'm going to save it in the Sidewinder bin directory, and I'm just going to call it my logo. Go ahead and replace whatever is there. And now when I go back to preferences, I can say use company logo. I'm going to say get logo. I'm going to go to C program Sidewinder bin and choose my logo, and hey, there it is. So now when I go ahead and create a summary report, you can see it's going to show your specific company logo, which is just sort of nice. Also, you could see that logo wasn't quite centered. I may maybe move it down a little, 0.8. Maybe I'll move it over a little. Let's also make that 0.8. I can change the width of the logo if I want. Let's just go ahead and save that. And there, that's pretty close to centered. I might want to play around with it, maybe make it a little bit wider, but all that width, the width simply changes the width of the logo, and the height, X and Y position of the logo relative to the page. So it's, like I say, just a way you can customize your report, but one of those things you do once and it's there for the rest of your reports. Company name, if you don't specify a company name here, just going back to the report, if I don't specify a company name, it will default to whatever the company name is on your USB key. Otherwise, you can go ahead and type in whatever you want. Joe Blow Company. Oops. And when I save that, you'll simply see it just puts Joe Blow Company for the company name there. Pretty straightforward. Shaft design preferences, again, just what you prefer, as well as default safety factors for the shaft calculations. So that's pretty much it in the preferences. There's not a lot there, but the logo is quite handy. Obviously, the language and the location is quite handy. And it's just an easy thing you can quickly customize when you first set up Sidewinder, and it's set for you for good. So, very good.